If he appeals, do you see a course for that appeal? What argument can the defense make that they didn't already, that the jury was so unconvinced by that they came to this verdict in 3 hours?
I think one of the arguments that Abbe Lowell will probably make in his appeal is the constitutional issue. Right now, the Supreme Court is considering a case that's similar in the sense where someone has to admit on a form whether or not they were an addict. And so I think that will come back. I think the verdict was fair. The jury followed the law, and there was an overwhelming amount of evidence in this case. Hunter Biden is someone who has very publicly struggled with addiction, and the prosecutors were able to prove that he lied on a form and that he possessed a gun. But I also think that I don't know that this case would have been brought if his name wasn't Hunter Biden. This isn't a charge that's normally brought as a standalone case. He never fired the gun, he never used it in commission of another crime, and he only owned it for 11 days.
So what does he potentially get out of an appeal, knowing that he's aiming for another trial, a much more serious one potentially this fall?
What he gets out of an appeal, I think we're first focused on sentencing, because that comes before any appeal is filed. And what is important to keep in mind with regard to the sentencing is that a year ago, prosecutors were offering him a diversion program. And I think that he should probably be offered that diversion program again. He's coming to court now for sentencing as a convicted felon. And I don't think, humbly, that he should be offered any sort of incarceratory period.
Well, knowing that the maximum sentence is 25 years in prison, for him to not get prison time at all is definitely something to consider here, Deanna. There also is the question for Hunter Biden and his defense team if he's pursuing an appeal process. And I asked this of a few others earlier today. He decided not to testify in his own defense during the regular course of this trial. Should he do so on appeal? Do you think that could potentially influence the outcome of that attempt?
So in the appeal process, I don't think he would testify. The reason oftentimes defendants don't testify in their own defense, I mean, you create testimony that could be inconsistent down the road. And throughout the appeal process, though, testifying is not something that would come to fruition.
We just started our conversation with Nick Ackerman, suggesting that it would be in Hunter Biden's best interest to plead guilty in this next trial. A number of legal minds have agreed with him over the course of the day on Bloomberg. Do you as well?
It depends on what the offer is. Like I said before, prosecutors in the gun case a year ago were offering him a diversion program. And I think that is what Abbe Lowell and Hunter Biden will be looking for in the sentencing in this case. And so I think Nick Ackerman said that he wouldn't be facing a lot of time on the tax case. And so I think he needs to balance out what he would receive if he would receive the diversion program here, and how much time he's being offered in the other case.
Well, it does seem that time really is the thing, Deanna, not in terms just of time he might have to serve, but also the time at which that trial realistically is going to happen. It's set right now for early September, just 2 months before the presidential election. Do you think there's realistic opportunity for his defense to delay it until after?
I think defense attorneys are often able to delay cases, and if there's a valid reason to delay it, then a judge will probably get granted.
You know, we're balancing a couple of stories here. Deanna, it's Hunter Biden. Of course, it's Donald Trump. If it weren't for this verdict today, we'd be probably talking a lot more about an appointment that the former president had with a probation officer, an interview that we had been anticipating. It took place virtually. And this is going to result in, I'd love for you to describe it in more detail for our listeners and viewers, a report that will be factored into Donald Trump's sentencing. Should the public see that report?
I don't think it should go to the public. I think that the probation department, the point of the interview is for them to get to know Donald Trump, get to see whether or not he accepts responsibility for the crimes, and make an assessment about whether or not they think that he should be facing an incarceratory sentence. Prosecutors will also make a submission to the judge recommending a sentence. And at that point, Judge Merchan will take all of these factors into account, and he'll hand down his sentence in July.
And what realistically do you expect that sentence will look like, considering you just said there part of what plays into this is whether or not the criminal defendant or the convict, I guess, in this case actually expresses remorse for the crimes that were committed. We have yet really to see Donald Trump do so. So how do you think that factors in?
It's somewhat of a catch-22 because we know that Donald Trump is going to appeal the case. And so he's not going to admit responsibility for the crime because he's appealing it. But I think that there's a good chance that Judge Merchan does impose a short incarceratory period. I think the fact that Donald Trump violated the gag order so many times during the course of the trial and just flaunted the rule of law, that will certainly be something that comes into account for Judge Merchan when he's deciding what the sentence should be.
Well, we have a lot to look forward to here. To the extent that you see equivalency, Deanna, what's your perspective on these two cases? There's a political, obviously, side to this, but from a legal standpoint, do they deserve equal time?
Do Donald Trump and Hunter Biden deserve equal time? If that's the question,
Yes.
Then absolutely not. They're two separate cases. And I think when you talk about political prosecutions, you really just have to look at the difference with Joe Biden today saying, I will not pardon my son, and that he'll follow what the justice system hands down, as opposed to the former president who said everything to the opposite of that effect.